What's up, Guardians, and welcome back, Titans. I'm Profane, thanks for checking out the video. Today we're checking out one of the most explosive Titan builds available in Destiny 2 right now. An incredible arc build that has the power to one-shot champions, tormentors, subjugators, and other high-value enemies, making this a terrific build option to use in Grandmaster Nightfalls, Legendary and Master Lost sectors, and even certain dungeons like the Sundered Doctrine. Today's build hones in on the upgraded power of the Arc subclass, where we'll be able to take advantage of explosive bolt charges, which are extremely overpowered right now thanks to the new seasonal artifact, and we'll be combining those spicy bolt charges up with a pair of green greaves, an incredible set of exotic boots that will provide us with a massive increase to the damage of our seismic strike. This grants us with a 225% increase to the impact damage of shoulder charges whenever the Peregrine Strike buff is active. In order to activate this buff, we simply need to build up momentum and then leap into the air just before performing our seismic strike. After we've been airborne for just half a second, the Peregrine Strike buff will appear on our screen, and once that appears, every mid-air shoulder charge is going to be overcharged. When these are used against champions, tormentors, and mini-bosses, those enemies will take 1000% increased impact damage, and after striking those enemies with Seismic Strike, we'll have our melee energy fully restored. This provides very few advantages when it comes to rank and file enemies, making an exotic like the Syntheseps a much better option when it comes to general gameplay. To see and feel the full potential of the Peregrine, you would need to be in activities that are filled with tormentors, subjugators, mini-bosses, and champions, and that's where the benefits of this exotic can quickly outweigh that of the Syntheseps and many other exotics, and because of the current focus towards bolt charges and arc abilities in general, the synergy between this exotic and subclass is stronger than ever. There's been a number of changes that have been made to Arc Titans that have helped this subclass compete in more in-game content, which has had a direct impact on this build's potential. Amplified now provides a 15% bonus in damage resistance, which can be stacked on top of other buffs like Spark of Resistance to provide us with as much as a 25% bonus in damage resistance. Knockout is much more reliable, and it's going to greatly improve our survival since we'll be able to instantly replenish our health after defeating enemies with our Seismic Strike. We'll gain an extra 50% damage to our powered melee abilities whenever Knockout is active. That's a 50% increase in overall melee damage, which means it would increase the amount of impact damage that the Peregrine deals, adding on 112% extra impact damage against rank and file enemies, and as much as 500% extra impact damage against tormentors, mini-bosses, and champions. With the Peregrines putting us up in the air, we will need to be sure to take advantage of the improved benefits that the Juggernaut aspect provides. When our class ability energy is full and we start sprinting, a frontal shield will develop. This will be valued at 50 HP, but whenever we're amplified, the overall health of the shield will grow to 75 points. When we're amplified, the frontal shield will gain a 33% bonus in damage resistance and a 60% increase in splash damage resistance. And while the overshield is active, we'll gain an extra 10% overall bonus to our own damage resistance. So now we've got a ton of extra damage resistance to protect us as we're performing those powerful Peregrine strikes. As the overshield takes damage, stacks of bolt charges will start building up, providing you with as many as 6 stacks. So with what we would have from our overshield, we'll be able to instantly trigger bolt charges once we land our seismic strike. So not only are those high value enemies taking a ton of extra impact damage, but they're getting blasted by powerful lightning strikes at the same time. And there's a number of ways that we can improve the lethality of these bolt charges. With the Flashover Artifact mod active, we'll be able to give our bolt charges a 150% increase in damage, and with the Dielectric mod equipped, we'll gain stacks of bolt charges by defeating enemies who are blinded and jolted, and that works out great for us since Seismic Strike will apply blind. We've also got the Photonic Flare Artifact mod, so whenever we defeat severed and exhausted enemies, more blinding explosions will be triggered, helping us build up those bolt charges faster so that we can mow down those big beefy enemies easier. There's one artifact mod in particular that will provide us with a lot of advantages whenever we take on champions. The Defibrillating Blast mod grants us with a full stack of bolt charges whenever we stun a champion. A bolt charge will then be triggered, and all nearby enemies will be jolted, and you'll gain a small amount of health back in the process. In the right situation, this could create back-to-back bolt charges, and we could potentially keep chaining those if we have enough champions present. With bolt charges and seismic strike dealing as much extra damage as they are, and with a thunder crash in our back pocket, there's not a champion, mini-boss, or tormentor out there that's safe. We've mentioned a fair amount of artifact mods so far, and we have a number of others that will provide us with situational benefits. But before we talk about those, let's finish out our class tree by checking out our choice in Fragments. We are using the aforementioned Spark of Resistance to provide ourselves with that bonus damage resistance whenever we get surrounded. We've also got Spark of Feedback active, so whenever we receive melee damage, our melee damage will be increased by 40%, giving our Seismic Strike even more potency, but we've only got 5 seconds to retaliate. And when this is active alongside Knockout and the Peregrine Strike, enemies like Champions and Tormentors are going to take over 2000% increased impact damage. We've got Spark of Ions active, so whenever we defeat jolted and blinded enemies, we're going to create ionic traces, and these are going to be created from enemies defeated by bolt charges. Ionic traces provide 15% extra class ability energy and 12.5% extra melee and grenade energy, giving us our Seismic Strike and our Juggernaut abilities back much more quickly. Whenever we strike high-value targets with Seismic Strike, we'll have our energy instantly regenerated. But whenever we use it on low-level enemies, we're not going to get that energy back. So you might want to consider equipping Melee Kickstart and other armor mods like Invigoration and Momentum Transfer so that we can have our Seismic Strike more readily available. We've got Spark of Discharge active, so whenever we collect Ionic Traces, we're going to gain additional stacks of bolt charges. This also gives our arc weapons the chance of creating ionic traces, and we could even go a step further by adding arc weapons that come with Volt Shot, Jolting Feedback, or Rolling Storm, which would help us create more blinding explosions, more ionic traces, and more bolt charges. We do have a lot of incentive to use arc weapons with this build, but because of our seasonal artifact, we'll have reason to branch out to other affinities. So based on what activities we're jumping into and what modifiers are present, we will be rotating through a mixture of loadouts that incorporate strand, arc, and even void energies. And that's one of the most appealing aspects of running the Peregrine, because you're never going to be limited to any certain weapon. And with that said, let's go ahead and talk about our preferred weapon loadouts and the artifact mods that we'll need to activate based on what weapons we decide to use. One extremely underrated exotic option that I like using with this build is the Bastion. It's a fusion rifle, so it'll reap the benefits of particle reconstruction, and it will stun unstoppable champs. It was recently given the added benefit of what is essentially 1-2 punch, which would grant us with another 100% increase to melee damage after striking enemies with a majority of your pellets. The advantage to this version of 1-2 punch is that you'll have it active for just under 2.5 seconds, which is plenty enough time to get momentum, get up in the air, and pull off a Peregrine Strike. Another powerful option in the kinetic slot would be the Monte Carlo, an exotic that revolves around the use of your melee. This will help us generate a ton of extra Seismic Strike energy, and after we defeat enemies with our melee, we'll give the Monte Carlo its bayonet, which deals out a considerable amount of damage. My favorite exotic to run with this build is the Buried Bloodline. Sidearms gain the benefit of piercing barrier shields right now. It's also a void weapon, so it'll reap the benefits of Volatile Marksman, Maligned Harvest, and Void Flux, helping us spread volatile and bursts of weakening all across the battlefield. This also weakens enemies on its own, and it triggers Devour, which would grant us with a secondary source of health regeneration, and it would improve the uptime of our grenades. More grenades means more damage, and more health regeneration means better survival. And it's for survival's sake that I find glaives to be a very smart option right now. Glaives are able to handle unstoppable champs, and with a No Bell artifact mod equipped, they'll generate extra ammo. The Rake Angel is one of the strongest options right now, but there's several other top tier contenders, including the Vex Caliber, or the Greasy Lug from Ghost of the Deep, which can drop with a rare 4th column option of Redirection, which is proving to be a very powerful damage boosting perk. Hold the Line would be a great artifact mod to run with glaives, or even heavy machine guns. This way both of these weapon types will provide you with health back after getting final blows whenever surrounded. The Heavy Ordnance Regeneration mod gives us even more reasons to include heavy machine guns. Sustained damage with this weapon type will grant us with an extra 25% damage resistance, along with improved regen to our melee and grenade abilities. There's a lot of powerful options when it comes to heavy machine guns. The Thunderlord is always a great and easy to use option, but when it comes to legendary choices, a few standouts right now are the Corrective Measure, the Watchful Eye, and the Circular Logic. But in the end, it's going to be best to suit your loadouts according to the activity that you're in. And remember that the Peregrines and those Seismic Strikes are going to take care of all the champions, the Tormentors, and all the high value targets. So all you need to worry about when it comes to weapon options will be the rank and file enemies and the final encounter bosses. The Peregrine Greaves is such an incredible exotic to build around, and it's so good right now in Heresy. It promotes a really fun and adventurous playstyle for Titans, and it gives you that big power up when you need it the most, when you're going up against some of the most terrorizing enemies in the game. So if you haven't taken the time to try this amazing exotic on the new and improved Arc subclass, then it's high time you do so. And once you have, let me know what your impressions were, and let us know your thoughts of all the upcoming changes and all the new activities coming with the next act of Heresy. If you need help getting today's build set up, then be sure to check out the dim and Mobalytics links that are down in the description. Thank you as always for checking out the video. If you enjoyed and found it helpful, then be sure to hit that like button below, along with the subscribe button if you're new. Both are greatly appreciated, and both really do help support the channel. And until next time, Guardians, this has been Profane, wishing you all some happy hunting.